Okay, yep, I see it says recording in the top left corner. So thank you all so much for being here. I'm Amy Berger. I am the president of the Honors Advisory Council. And we have been doing this event in previous years in person, but I think that having it virtually is a really cool opportunity for people to join that maybe are more far-flung. So I just want to introduce our panel, and I believe you should be able to see it in the chat panel, the links to everyone's LinkedIn profile if you want to learn more about the individuals who are here as part of this keynote panel. But I am actually going to let Paul take over, and I think they're going to each talk a little bit about their professional background and then open it up for student questions. So I look forward to an interesting discussion.
Sounds good. And be ready to ask questions by at least putting them in chat. We'll try and watch there, and it's really your time. But with that said, ladies first, Nancy.
Okay, so quick intro. I have been in human resources now for 30 years. Well, hate saying that, but it's been 30. Primarily in banking and real estate. And currently I'm the Chief Talent Officer at Walton Communities. And I'm just going to leave it at that because I figure you can go look at my LinkedIn profile if you wanted to see more specific of things I've done. But happy to be here today and hope we can help.
Awesome. York.
Hey, my name's York Reynolds. I am currently Manager of Associate Services with ZEP Inc. And I've been with the company about 6 months now. And I have been in HR/recruiting for almost 25 years, and my background is accounting and finance prior to that. That's me.
Great. And, York has a lot of background that in primarily what industries, York? I know it was
banking and consumer products and finance and accounting.
Great. And you probably got a ZEP product in your home if you have any cleaning products.
Right.
Exactly.
Awesome. Paul Lopez here. I'm sort of the fill in the gaps of anything. If any of you have an interest in being an entrepreneur and working for yourself, certainly that's what I currently do. And I actually run a venture capital firm for such entrepreneurs who are doing technology startups. My other careers are in teaching at business schools in California, Louisiana, and here in Georgia, and then another couple of careers primarily driving revenue in the banking area. And then before that, 20 plus years of high tech with companies like Xerox and IBM. So we thought we'd keep it short, and somebody help us with the chat. So far, no questions, and maybe I'll just start off with a couple of Yes Royce technology startups. We have 41 companies in our portfolio currently over the last 3 years, all across the US. And then I'm also co-chair an angel group that has invested in another 22 companies, all in early stage technology stuff. So with that said, you know what, I'm gonna ask Nancy and York, in your current roles and in your current companies, Nancy, you know what, just take seconds, just in case somebody doesn't know who Walton Communities is.
Okay, so we're here in Georgia and we build and manage apartment communities. So we've got about 35 properties, primarily in the Atlanta area, but we're also in Gainesville and Augusta. Half of our portfolio is also in the tax credit or low income. And we do that a little bit different than most. So it's kind of part of our mission also. I don't know, does that help?
That is, yeah. So we'll ask the same question. York, you go first. Is your company hiring virtually, doing in-person interviews? And your company is, of course, a very big company, so obvious. And then Nancy, same question, given today's environment, right?
Paul, it really is a mixture of both virtual and in-person. In fact, there are several times that I bring the final candidate or two. So initial interviews, yes, virtual and on the phone. But once we narrow the position down to 2 or 3 people, we generally bring those in. And inevitably, what happens is a person's here sitting where I'm at, interviewing in the conference room, but then we've got an individual who has a need to work from home or to be virtual because of family situation or whatever with the pandemic. And so we have them on site interviewing with that interviewer virtual. So it's a little bit of a mixture of both. I think with regards to how to prepare for candidates or for students that are graduating and beginning to get out in the market is to be prepared for both and be open to both. I was pretty reluctant at first to kind of buy into the virtual interview, but after having gone through it myself and coming here, I've embraced it and it's actually working very well.
Okay. Nancy, how are things being done at Walton?
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything to add to that. It's exactly the same here. I mean, most every candidate has some combination of phone, a Teams or, you know, online, Zoom call or what have you, interview, and then a face-to-face. And I think in this environment, there may be even be more interviews because of that.
The way I say it is we all have the privilege of time. There's no commute time.
Yeah.
There's no travel time. I'm on Zoom calls these days with people from all over the world, literally every day. And you can do that whether you live in Gainesville or Atlanta or California or London. So in that regard, I see a question Amy asked on behalf of all of the students. These students can't be this quiet, by the way. So either you really are eating lunch and not listening to us, or else we'll ask you some questions. So
yes,
we'll take Anna's question. And has it been a change? We'll go ladies first. Has it been a change to move where I suspect you always did mostly in-person interviews once they pass that initial screening, Nancy, and doing anything different, or do you think the candidates have to prepare differently?
We have always had several components of our interview process over the phone because so much of our work is, or a lot of our work is done on the phone. So we want to experience people's phone skills. But I do think that I'm reading the question here about like, are there common issues that we see with the virtual interviews? There's something, connecting with the candidate is a little bit different online. Would you experience that, York?
It is, yes.
That as the candidate, you really have to pay attention to being engaged, being prepared, what's around you, behind you, what you're looking, you know, you might want to, even before you get on, see what it looks like so that you know that what you're presenting is what you want to present. I mean, I've had a few where the stuff in the background is like, oh, and you just question because that's all you know about the person, right? Anyway,
and I would add.
Go ahead.
I would add to that not practicing, but testing ahead of time.
Yeah.
I've had several second phase, third phase interviews where it just seemed like the connection was not strong enough. And there's some preparation that could be done on behalf of the candidate. Even if it's Nancy and I shooting an email to each other in a Zoom connection, let's just make sure friend to friend, I've got an interview in 15 minutes. Can we test my connection here? And is it working well? Is there a delay? Mm-hmm. Because that really does impact the interviewer's perception of you.
Right.
Regardless of the fact that you can't help it. So just making sure you've got a good connection, that you're direct wired if you can, in order to make sure that that presentation, not only what's seen, but the perception, is there a delay in your conversation? Is it skipping? Is it, you know, there's just some technological things that you could do ahead of time to make sure that your interview goes well.
I'd say the only thing I'd add from all of that is whether it's in person or whether you're coming over a virtual connection, think about what's the interviewer really grading you on, and likely it's 3 areas. I mean, when all is said and done, you know, they can have a 12-part list, et cetera. They're looking for hard skills. You know, if they're looking for an accountant, they want to know how you did as in your accounting degree. Did you start any CPA certification exams? That's the hard skills. And the questions they're asking invariably at your level have a lot to do with that. But they have 2 other areas that they're asking the question to sort of do a checkbox to do the next interview. The second one, whether it's in person or not, and that's the soft skills. We'll come back to that. They want to know, will you fit in with the rest of the group? Invariably, you're not going to work for a single person garage operation in most cases. And how will you fit in? And then the third one is what they call culture and values, right? Do you come across where you've got a certain grounding? And if you put, no matter what, every interviewer, like I said, may have a 12-part list, but they fall into those 3 categories. Can you make sure that in this virtual meeting or in-person meeting, you're going to get a 10 out of 10 on all of those? So you just think about it. That's how you get called to a second interview, a third interview, et cetera. So in fact, Amy asked, how much does soft skills matter? What's your perspective? And I've just used an example. You're looking for an accountant, or you're looking for somebody to be a XYZ engineer, or, you know, a marketing major is coming out of there. York, you want to go first? Versus the soft skills side, right?
Yes, basically, once I have gotten comfortable with your technical skills around accounting or marketing, whatever the situation is, that you've proven your background, and for an entry level, it's a little bit different, but I agree with the whole thing around the idea around culture. Mainly what I'm looking for, whether in banking or even now in manufacturing, is, can you show me examples of where you've taken initiative? Can you show me examples or talk to me about examples where you took a leadership role and can actually give me an answer that quantifies what you did? I'm looking for those types of things, because in any environment, especially now during, for you coming out, being in the pandemic world right now, as employers, we're looking for people that can roll their sleeves up, that can think a little bit outside of the box and do not necessarily what's directly told to me. Because of the world we're living in, I have to have people that are willing to kind of roll their sleeves up, get their hands dirty with regards to maybe the job next door, whatever that situation is. So really, it's taking initiative and being willing to be a team player and being able to talk to me about examples where you did that in the past.
Great. By the way, I'm just going to mention something. Remember I said, hard skills, soft skills, and values? Less than half of you have your cameras on, by the way. That would not be a good idea in an interview kind of deal. Today may be different, but I just throw it out. I go to a lot of meetings in which I tell everybody the #1 reason you will get a job is, fill in the blank. Anybody know the answer? Type it in. #1 reason. It's 7 out of 10 jobs come because of this capability, okay? And there's obvious things, I mean, good communication skills, but 7 out of 10 jobs are found not because of advertising, not because it's, on Monster, et cetera. They come because of networking. So here's a great opportunity to network, and only half of you are using it. I just throw that out. So Nancy, I'll ask you a slightly different question. Yeah, Eric got it, who you know. It also matches, you need to have what you know, but I just throw it out.
So before you ask me the question, I will just share with y'all, 95% of the people we hire are referred to us.
95. See,
95.
The stats are like when I teach networking and how to network. It's a skill most colleges don't teach. We do through our church, because I think it's such an important skill, and how to have a process, systematic way to do it. It really is. Think about it. When we're hiring, we will ask the current people, hey, do you know people that you'd love to work with again? That's a referral process, right? That's what gets us a pool. So just keep that in mind. You should always be networking, et cetera. But Nancy, I'm going to ask you a slightly different question. I like the one from Brian. How do you accommodate for people with disabilities? Do you do anything different in the hiring process, and or if somebody does get hired, what do you do?
Yeah, I think, I mean, if they let us know, we can accommodate, and we do. I've not found that to be a challenge. You know, I think the other thing, our customers live with us, so we're accommodating in that regard as well. So that's kind of part of our world on a daily basis.
And Brian, maybe can you be disabilities, which nowadays is just called different abilities?
There's many.
You want to add to what you're asking here, Brian?
What came to mind when I mentioned disabilities was more so of the mental health, especially since it's a major concern nowadays. For example, people who have psychosomatic symptoms of their mental health, where they have a panic attack, or they need to go to the restroom a lot of times, or some days they have trouble getting out of bed. I was wondering more so of those mental illness or clinical mental illness.
As long as somebody communicates that with us, we can come alongside and support them. If they don't let us know and it's impacting performance, we don't know how to support that. So there's got to be some conversation, and then absolutely we come alongside.
And I don't know if in today's, the American with Disabilities Act is more sort of people with physical disabilities. I don't know if it's now extended to mental health
and
or not.
I think you have to care about all of that with your team members. And sometimes someone might start with you and not have a disability hasn't been either shared or even diagnosed, but then after they've worked with you for a while, they share it, or it has been diagnosed. So again, I do think that it's very much a partnership, and you can't support it if you don't know what it is, or you're not made aware of what's needed. And I would venture to say most companies are like that, but maybe.
Yeah. York, how big is ZEP today? How many employees total?
2,500 worldwide.
Okay. In those, let's say when you're hiring somebody straight out of school, or they may be in their last semester, so they're going to do joint kind of deal. What kind of extracurricular activities do you think would jump out on a resume that would have you pick this set of students versus this one?
Right. I mainly look at, and actually not necessarily just here, ever since I was at Coke and at Wachovia as well, is really looking for leadership roles. It's one thing to be a member. It's a whole nother story to be a leader. And so really what I look for is, with that individual that's involved on campus, and it really, if you're involved and not necessarily leader, you still can talk about your accomplishments. But really what I look for is an individual who can kind of juggle all of that. Get the good grades, but also be involved on campus. That there's a lot that speaks to not only ability to prioritize, but it also the communication skills, all of that kind of wrapped up together makes for an ideal candidate. One that's been involved on campus, but actually has studied and done well in school as well. Student athletes are another great example. Generally, they have to be able to, their life is to a certain degree that sport, and whether it's golf or whatever, and then, then they're keeping up their grades at the same time. So those types of things.
So it's more the
to that too.
Go ahead, Nancy.
I would add volunteering. I agree with everything York said. Those are the exact same things that I look at, and then I think also volunteering and leadership roles in that, yeah.
Or even campus kind of groups. Are you in, to the point, did you become treasurer? Did you, that would be a great addition if I'm looking for a job that had some kind of numerical aspects to it. If you were president of a XYZ club kind of deal, and And would you be able to answer the questions that really showed you exhibited leadership, right?
Especially if you were voted, you know, if you were voted on to be that leader, because then others see you as a leader. So, I mean, York brings up a great point. It's an easy way for us to see how others see somebody.
Yeah. Nancy, this might apply in almost what you might have told Ben before. Given these students have the opportunity to probably continue, even though nobody said they're graduating in May, so they're at least X months away from graduating, would you recommend that they stay on and consider going to grad school until the economic situation may settle better? You know, the whole level of unemployment, et cetera, is still working itself out for a while? Or would you say go do something jointly? What would you recommend?
You know, I think we saw this back in 08 and 09 too, where so many students they went and got their master's degrees and then came out and didn't have any work experience, and then were looking for a different type of position, and that wasn't there. So I would, if someone was already planning on getting their master's, I might say, go ahead and do it. But if they weren't, I feel that there are jobs out there. I don't think that, I think that they'd be able to find a good job now if they wanted to go ahead and start their career. It might look a little different in that you might not be in the office every day or what have you, but you could still at least get your career started.
And my answer would be, you know, it's one of those, it depends. If let's say you're at the place where you could find a job, and by the way, there are many jobs open that just have a skills gap that there isn't enough supply right now, and well-paying jobs. I mean,
right.
Number of fields, et cetera. I would say go do that.
Right.
And potentially the employer might help you with later on coming back to do an MBA or, you know, a master's of science, if in fact it helps both your skill set and them as well. York, anything you'd say at ZEP, whether you would tell somebody, you know, and how you view the value of a grad degree versus, you know, by the way, my answer also is why graduate with a whole lot of debt, right?
No, that's another point. Absolutely.
There's a fine line, I have to say, because, you know, a lot of times with the master's degree comes a desire to make more money. But yet when you look at skill sets and what they bring to the table, unfortunately, a lot of times I'm not able to afford that MBA level candidate for the analyst job that I have open.
Right.
So it's just a fine line. And I think it's being selective enough and having enough forethought as a candidate to look at the right jobs. If you're that MBA candidate, you know, look for those MBA training programs that are valuing that MBA, you know, having that advanced degree. Because again, it's hard to put an MBA candidate in an analyst role at an analyst salary. Sometimes that's just a little hard.
I think there's a lot to be said in terms of I'd recommend, if at all possible, go get some work experience.
I agree with that before you get your master's. I really think
if you said, what's the best multiplier? Go get work experience. The master's or whatever, et cetera, will follow when it follows.
All right, there's some other questions here.
Oh, great.
So do you look at a candidate's social media? Sometimes, not all the time. But yes, I think people should pay attention to that. But I want to add, can I add something in here that and I think this kind of goes back to a little bit about what we were talking about. And somebody asked the question of like, what does one person have over another to make them the perfect candidate? And I think in every company it's different. And that's where you as the candidate have a responsibility to be interviewing the company as much as the company is interviewing you. You know, is it the right company for you? So do you know people that work there that you can get a feel for that? Have you done your research on the organization and the leaders of the organization? And does that feel like a good place for you? Don't have it always be about, am I going to pick you? You might not pick me, and that's okay. you've got to be really, you know you better than anybody else. And so you need to be thinking about what's important to you in the organization that you're going to work for, and then trust the process. And it'll end up being the right fit if you're as engaged in it as the organization is. That'd be my.
Let me tell you, if you're asking your parents or your grandparents how they got jobs, or any of us, we're a different generation.
Right.
In our generation, there needed to be more structure, very clear aspects of compensation. You folks belong to a generation where the company is actually trying to make sure that you're a good fit, but that they're a good fit for you, as Nancy said.
Yeah.
That culture fit, and it's about experiences now. Today, let me ask the question, what's the average length of time a career job is being held by somebody in corporate America today? When I started back in the 70s working for IBM, at that time, it was highly usual to have people work in a company 25, 30 years. What do you think that average is now? Take a guess. Come on, this is where you can, York, how many?
3.
3? It's a little more than that. It's like 4.7. What it says, and I tell people, by the way, don't go and flit every year kind of deal, or every couple of years. You know, build skills, put something back in, and you'll be a better commodity kind of deal. And today, that's what companies are looking for. How can we get the most out of you, but also put something into you? I think that generation and how they interview you as millennials or Gen Z is different than that structured baby boomers, et cetera.
All right, here's some more.
Yeah, good questions. So I don't know if we answered the social media. The answer is everything counts. By the way, you know what? We're all a product of what our experiences are. And when you have an odd looking email, I wonder what was the person thinking. I shouldn't wonder, but I do, right? It's like, right? Why wouldn't you just create something like P. Lopez? I mean, right? In today's world with Gmail, you can create anything versus. So everything does matter about you. You don't want to give anybody a reason to go, you know, they've got a stack. How many resumes come into ZEP nowadays, York?
I'm getting, for any position, generally about 60 or so applications a week. So.
Wow. So you want to stand out, basically, and certainly we talked about networking and all of that stuff. I like, and I'm going to get this name wrong. In fact, give us, how do you pronounce your name? In fact, ask your question. Let's see, Ike-Chu Wu, but I probably got that totally wrong. Ask your question live.
Yes, it's Ike-Chu. And my question was, like, speaking of grades versus like campus involvement and leadership, like how would you kind of place or like rank the two, I guess, qualities or achievements against each other? And I gave an example there. You have two candidates for a position. One of them has a 4.0 and the other one doesn't have as good of a GPA, but then he's like really involved. And so what would be like your decision?
We can all three answer it. We might answer it differently.
Yeah, go ahead, Nancy. How would you
I'm taking the leadership.
Okay. York?
It's a good balancing act, but I think in the end, I would probably go with the leadership because it shows me that they've achieved things. But at the same time, I have to say that I have certainly hired that 4.0 over the 3.3 in other instances too. So it's really just kind of the situation and the position.
And I'd go with leadership, other than if it was a job that required, you know, was a science job, a research job where that mental kind of capability was really one of the top fit needs kind of deal. But look, I hire for a very simple reason. Can you get things done? In today's world where people are working all over the place, there's not enough time for supervision. Can you get things done? And so if you told me just those two aspects to hire from, I'd go with who's likely to get it done, right? So
I'm going to jump in real quick. I know we have a bunch of questions in the chat, which is wonderful. We're got about 5, maybe 7 minutes left. Eric Jones is next, and he's graciously said he can you all can run over a little bit because I think this is a great discussion. So students, if you have any other questions, please do put them in the chat so we can get to them before we move to the next part.
Make it really worth our while. So we'll take Claire. Should she take a gap year, you know, considering joining AmeriCorps or whatever else? Claire, let me ask, how real is this question, or are you really considering this? Let's make it all real, right? Where's Claire?
Yeah. So I am graduating in December of this year. Looking forward to, you know, like getting out of the school environment, but I don't feel necessarily ready for a job, but I would like to get some work experience. And I think AmeriCorps could be a great opportunity for me. But I'm just wondering, is that seen as beneficial when applying? I would say like yes, because it's giving me time to like think about what I want to do with my life, get a little bit of experience, but just wanted to hear y'all's thoughts on that.
And then you had a secondary one about internships. So Nancy, you want to take that one?
Yeah, it's interesting. I recently hired somebody that did that, and it's been very was a good hire. But I do think it depends on the individual. I don't know that sometimes these questions aren't generic for everybody. So it's really going to be then, what do you present when you're interviewing about what you learned and why you did it, and what the, you know, so what you got out of it, what you're bringing to the table, why you're the best person for the job that we're interviewing for. And I do think that internships, all of the experience you can get in whatever you're doing is great. You know, I mean, even if your experience is working at a fast food restaurant, but you got some good experience and some good learning, great. You know, you're bringing that to the table wherever you go, but it's up to you to get all of that experience in whatever you're doing. Does that make sense?
If you could answer the question of so what, right? That an interviewer would see from the so what of what you did. As an example, I believe internships is a great way to network. For you to find out about that company, many of them are going to offer you a job, by the way, when you do graduate, and vice versa. So
that's true.
That's a great one. Claire, what's your field? That might also help us get a better insight whether we'd recommend AmeriCorps or internships or none of the above.
Yeah, so my field is human services, very similar to social work, very much like community involvement, that sort of thing.
You think you want to go work for a nonprofit or a for-profit?
I would be okay with either. I would like to get some experience in both of those. I've had a lot of, or I've had at least 3 internships with nonprofits. So I would like to kind of touch in the for-profit sector if possible.
Yeah. York, any insights of AmeriCorps service-oriented volunteer work / internships?
You know, again, I think Nancy hit it on the head, is really just being able to communicate and speak to the experiences that you have. You know, being able to look back at your experience as, you know, an internship or even in volunteer work, AmeriCorps, whatever it is, and really think about it from what did I learn? What did I do that impacted others? You know, being able to speak to those soft skills that you know, the things that you learned, and being able to communicate those things is invaluable whenever going through an interview process.
Good. I think knowing that we'll need to end in about 2, 3, 4 minutes, I'm going to say, York, take a minute. If there was one thing you want to leave folks here, either whatever that you thought, boy, I wish I'd known when I was coming out of college, and then Nancy the same, and I'll do the same as a closing comment.
For me, it would be, I guess that being able to roll my sleeves up and get my hands dirty. That's the one thing that I, you know, from going through college and that type of thing, I thought this was going to be my job and that was all I was going to be doing. And that's not the case. And the one thing that has helped me and, you know, grow in my career is being able to kind of mold and fit what is needed. And not only has that helped me with my, you know, with job in and of itself, but then it also helped me with referrals and being able to getting connected with Paul and Nancy 15 years ago was basically by referrals and connections and things like that. So,
yeah.
Nancy?
I think that to me is the biggest thing is the is networking. I think that building those relationships and not burning bridges throughout your career are going to be really important. And those relationships are from school on and will serve you well. And just know that whatever you're doing, you're representing yourself, and it's kind of out there forever now, the way things are, right? So yeah, networking definitely is a big piece.
I'd leave you with this. In fact, when I used to teach at Kennesaw State for many years, we did something called the last lecture. Some of you may know the book or whatever. And here's what I tell you is life's too short for you to rely on the company to figure out what they're going to do for you. Mm-hmm. Knowing now that likely you're going to go through a number of companies potentially, or even within the same company, you'll move jobs, maybe different divisions, etc. What are your goals? Can you write them down? And then do you have a process to go after them? I'd say even if you don't do exactly that, writing them down and thinking about it, what will you do a year from now? How does this position you to set your goals and achieve them, right? It's not just all about making money. I think that frankly, that's overrated. After a while, I know at your level, you're probably thinking it isn't overrated. I need more. Please send me some kind of deal. But write that down, because I think if you can then figure out, again, remember I said hard skills, soft skills, and values. That third part we didn't talk about today. What are your values? Where will you, I call it, Nancy and I used to call it, where will you wake up in the morning when, you know, next week you start a new job and you go, wow, I'm getting to go enjoy myself today versus it's just another job. I think that's important. I know it is in your generation, even more so. So that's what I would say. The one thing is set a goal, write it down, look over it every 6 to 12 months. You're more likely to achieve it, by the way. The math says 67% more likely if you actually write it down. So interesting, right? I think Amy or whoever wants to close out, we've enjoyed our time, and I wrote down.
And any of you are welcome to reach out. I don't know if Amy's got my phone number, but you can connect with me on LinkedIn or through email or call.
Same with me.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. I really appreciate your time and contributions.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Bye all.
All right,
bye-bye.
Y'all have a great day.
All the best out there.
Thank you so much.
Good day.